Welcome to the Be Empowered podcast with your host, Graham Hopkins. My goal is to help you regain your power by bridging the gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are. In simple language, that is like making your childhood dreams come true. This is for those who want to make an impact in their lives but don't know how to get there. Be ensured, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world. So welcome everybody to this edition of the Be Empowered Show. I'm your host, Graham Hopkins. This is a conversation about what it's actually like to feel empowered. That is, to feel connected to our own truth as opposed to feeling disconnected from it. Today I have a wonderful guest, Dr. Andrew Powell. I've known Andrew for some time now. We've met in person in Sydney. And Andrew, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
G'day Graham, thanks for having me.
So Andrew, you're a chiropractor, a kinesiologist, an author and a speaker. You're the author of a wonderful book that I've read myself called The Money is the Mindset. Can you give us a bit of an overview as to maybe the background to your practice, who you're targeting and how you got there?
Sure mate, I'd love to. So as you mentioned, I'm a chiropractor and kinesiologist. I run a practice here in Sydney in Castle Hill, and I've been there about 12 years now. So I started off probably like most chiropractors, interested in fixing people's health, and what I was taught in chiropractic college was that meant fixing their structure, getting their spine aligned, all of that kind of stuff. And that's amazingly powerful for a lot of people. But there came a point in my practice where I realised that there was a certain amount of people that it just wasn't really getting the job done. And that kind of led me on a journey to discover another really important facet of health, which was our biochemistry. And I discovered that really our biochemistry is what drives a lot of our structure. And things got better. I was seeing, that sort of helped a whole other group of people, but there were still those people that I just wasn't seeing the results with. So I kept searching, and that's what really led me into this whole area of mindset. I started out learning some techniques like NET, which is neuro-emotional technique, and started to really understand the profound effect that our mind has on our body. Started to understand that our beliefs are actually what's driving our biochemistry and ultimately what's driving our structure. So once I got to that point, I felt I had a pretty good toolkit, if you like, for helping people. And, I like to walk my talk, so I started to really apply a lot of that mindset work to myself. I started using it, clearing, the areas of stress that we all have in our lives, and saw some profound changes. But the one area that didn't really shift for me at that time was the area of money. I was very busy in practice. I was seeing a lot of people, but not necessarily achieving financial rewards that I felt should come along with that. I was kind of, when I look at it now, I was basically on a path to burnout. I was really working much, much harder than I should. And, you talk about being connected or being disconnected. I was working myself into a pretty disconnected place. I wasn't really spending the time with my friends and family that I used to. I wasn't looking after my body and my health in the way that I was used to. I used to be a rock climbing instructor. I was very, very passionate about things like rock climbing and snowboarding, and I just wasn't doing any of those things anymore. So that's kind of what led me on a journey that ended up being really the basis of that book. It was a journey of looking for what worked for me, and when you start to make changes and you start to see those results show up in your life, when other people start saying, mate, what are you doing differently? That was really a signpost for me. I was on the right track, and it's what's led me into the place I'm at now, where I kind of divide my time between practice and also between running something called the Money Mindset Mastery Program and coaching other practitioners. So helping people really get to that place of being in alignment and being congruent themselves.
Great. So, Andrew, I normally start off the show by asking the guest if they remember a time in their life where they actually feel disconnected as opposed to feeling connected, and then how you came out of it. Is there you've touched on it briefly already, but is there a specific point that you can raise to give us a greater awareness of how you overcame that disconnect?
Sure. For me, the first thing really was recognising it, because when you're in it, you're so caught up in it that it's hard to even see, and I guess that was really a profound moment in itself, was realising that where I was going was in a place of disconnection, and it wasn't really, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was doing all I was told, go out, work hard, see lots of patients, and everything else would fall into place. So just realising that path wasn't taking me where I wanted to go. And that's kind of when I started searching for answers, and I looked at lots of things, hypnosis and NLP, and I mentioned neuro-emotional technique and all of those things. But the thing that was a massive game changer for me, to be honest, was discovering something called the Lifeline technique. Basically, it's a methodology that allows us to make changes in our subconscious mind. And that was the moment really when things shifted for me, because I'd done all this work on my conscious mind. I understood what was going on, and I understood why I was feeling the way I was and what patterns were driving it. But I found that understanding doesn't actually drive change. I see this in my clinic. People come in, they've done work with psychologists and things like that, and they say, oh yeah, I understand my problem, I know where it came from, but they've still got the problem. And that was really the case for me. And it was being introduced to a technique that allowed me to shift that at a much deeper level, really shift that at that unconscious level where our programming kind of sits, was when I started to see some profound changes.
I've been a fan of Dr. Darren Wiseman of the Lifeline technique for quite a number of years. I've never done his training like you have, but can you tell me what's the difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind?
Sure. So it's massive, and the experts tell us that the conscious mind represents about 2 to 10% of our brain activity. The other 90 to 95% is the subconscious mind, and that's really the repository of all of our stored programs, emotional experiences, beliefs, all the things we just know to be about the world. A really good example is, when you first learn to drive a car, for instance, and at first it's kind of, you've got to handle everything with your conscious mind. So you're trying to think about steering the wheel, checking your mirrors, looking in your blind spot, getting an indicator when you change lanes, 1 foot on the pedal, the clutch, it's all these things that seem really overwhelming. But as we start to actually practice those things, the subconscious develops a program for those. And as it does, it kind of takes those things out of the conscious mind and puts them on autopilot, to the point where most of us could be, take a 20-minute drive, arrive at work, having talked on the phone, eaten a sandwich, and got there and thought, I have no memory of driving to work. I don't even know how I got here. And yet we didn't run any red lights, we didn't run anyone over. And it's because the subconscious really runs all those automatic programs. And in a situation like driving your car, that's incredibly useful. But there are times in your life when those subconscious programs are not really, in our highest good or in our best interest. And that's often when we're in that place of frustration, where we're banging our head against the wall and we seem to just keep coming up with the same result. We keep working but not earning what we're worth, or we keep attracting the wrong sort of partner, or we keep, making those same mistakes over and over again. And it's really the subconscious mind that's driving that.
you kind of saw a need amongst the your peers, I guess, in the medical profession. And I think you've set up a group, haven't you, where
Yes.
you're teaching others how to value themselves.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. When I wrote my book, I wrote it with health practitioners in mind because I was one, and that's what I know and what I understand. But the journey along the way has actually made me realise that most of the themes in it are universal. We're all people. Having said that, health practitioners particularly, it takes a particular type of person. We tend to be giving, we want to help, we want to, most health practitioners are not so much in it for the money, they're in it for the love of what they do, all of which is very honourable and fantastic. But oftentimes it's actually, the pendulum's swung too far that way, and it's to the detriment of their own health and their own financial future and all of that sort of thing. So health practitioners as a group have a strong tendency towards undervaluing themselves. They have a strong tendency towards overgiving, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with giving. In fact, it's a huge part of life. But when it's completely out of balance, when you're sending so much energy out and you're not actually allowing yourself to receive that back, then sooner or later something's got to give. And unfortunately for a lot of health practitioners, what ends up giving is either their own health or their personal relationships, or their business. They end up out of business because they can't continue to operate under those stresses. And I really saw that our society needs what we have to offer. It needs people who've got some real answers, who've got, there's so much value in natural health. And so looking after health practitioners is one of the things that allowed me to really have the greatest ripple effect. If I can coach a bunch of practitioners to really being empowered themselves, then they're going to go out and make huge changes in their communities. And that's exactly what we see within that group.
That's wonderful.
Hugely rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Andrew, how many involved in this group, and is it just in Australia?
At the moment it is. I'm sure there probably are other groups overseas, but the group, I've actually combined that group with a business mentor, and it's called Health Leaders Academy. So there are, over the last 5 or 6 years, there have been hundreds of people connected to that. And to the point now where we're sort of forming little subgroups. So I have a group of about 20 practitioners that I coach directly in Sydney, but I'm also part of the larger Health Leaders Academy family. We meet up in Byron Bay about 4 times a year, and that group involves health practitioners of all sorts, really, everything from chiropractors to naturopaths to acupuncturists to holistic integrative GPs, and basically every modality you can think of. And we get together a few times a year just to support each other, really. It's an incredibly supportive environment. Health practice can be pretty lonely. You're seeing lots of clients every day, but you don't have a lot of colleagues. You're in your own little office, you're like your own little island. And stepping outside of that and really connecting with people, when I first did it, it was so eye-opening to realise that all these things I thought I was struggling with on my own, everyone else is going through the same challenges. And we're all at different stages. Maybe some people had actually found some solutions that I was looking for, or maybe I had some solutions that could help them. So, I really can't even explain how grateful I am to have ended up where I am with that group. It's just, I can't imagine practicing without it, to be honest.
So you say that your teaching is universal, and I can see that. I've read your book. But can you explain a little bit about how money comes into this whole thing?
Sure. So in some ways I see money not as the goal of my work. It's often what attracts people to my work because it's what they're really having a challenge with in their life. But I kind of consider it as a doorway really to get into just clearing out the issues that are going on in our subconscious mind. See, money in our society is connected to so many things. Within that subconscious area that we were talking about, money to one person may represent security, to another person it represents love, somebody else it's status, somebody else it might be, power. It's this endless array of things that money is really connected to. I look at it like a neural network, the way that the neurons in our brain connect. When you fire off the money neuron, you're actually accessing so many different parts of the brain. And so on that level, money is a great entryway into clearing our stuff. Having said that, it's also kind of a nice thing to have around. A lot of people are doing well in so many areas of their lives, they just have this one piece that's holding them back. And it's not the be-all and end-all by any means, but it does allow a degree of freedom. When you take away some of that day-to-day stress of survival, of paying your bills, you can actually start to look at what's really important to me, what am I really here for, what have I got to give to the world. So in that way, I see money really is a stepping stone, but it's a very powerful one to get sorted.
So I know that you use kinesiology as a major tool in your practice to help people overcome this lack mentality, I guess you'd call it, in their mindset. So can you make kinesiology simple for the average person that may not have even heard of it?
Mate, I can try. I've been working on this for years.
Okay.
So I used to be very much in the position that people would come to me and say, I have no idea what you do, but it's great. People would refer their friends and family and they'd say, oh, so-and-so sent me. They said, it's going to be weird and you won't understand it, but it's great. The way I've come to explain it over the years, kinesiology uses testing our muscles, so it uses a way of monitoring the feedback of the body simply to pick up stress. Your nervous system is the central control system. It coordinates everything in your body, including your muscles. So when we create a stress for your nervous system, we can pick that up as a weak muscle. And that stress could really be on any level. It could be a structural stress, which might be a bone out of place, or a muscle that's cramping or something like that. It could be a chemical stress, like a substance that you're allergic to. If we took some mercury and put it on the body, something like that. Or it could be an emotional stress. I could get you to think about something stressful, for instance, that idea of lack, get you to think about paying your mortgage next week or something. And if that's creating stress for you, it's going to show up in your nervous system and we can detect that through a muscle test. The really beautiful thing about it is once we've detected that stress, we just search for what returns the muscle to strength. And that's basically telling us what's the antidote, what actually helps us to eliminate that stress from our system. So it becomes a very powerful tool for bringing ourselves into balance on all levels.
So Andrew, if I was to do a test on myself and I was not being true to myself, in other words, I was lying, then my muscle would give away. Why is that?
Correct. The reason is that, the idea of this, we might want to be lying, for instance, is what's going on in the conscious mind. But in the subconscious mind, it really only knows what it knows. It's the same principle that's picked up by a lie detector test. They're measuring things like changes in the electrical potential in the skin, changes in your heart rate and breathing. All of these things are automatic signals that happen because the subconscious mind actually controls the body. And another one that we could add to that would simply be the muscle test. So if you make a statement that's not true for you or that you don't believe is true, then, so we're not measuring necessarily absolute truth, we're really measuring what you're congruent with. So if I make the statement, my name's Andrew, that muscle's going to hold nice and strong. But if I say my name's Bugs Bunny, no matter how much that doesn't feel particularly stressful to me, we can still pick up that creates a level of stress from my nervous system and it shows up as a weak muscle.
Cool. So how do you use this in your mindset journey? I mean, you've obviously created a mindset journey for yourself whereby you've taught yourself all these principles that you're now teaching others. So how have you created this yourself?
Well, kinesiology gives you a really good tool to keep yourself honest, because you can check in on those things. You know, you can, for instance, have someone stand up and say, yes, I want to be rich, and test that out, and it just goes weak as water, because in the subconscious mind there might be a belief that I don't deserve to be rich, or that rich people are bad people, or, you know, any one of hundreds of different mindset blocks that we come up against. And so really what I did is just rigorously applied that to myself. And the foundations of it, I think, are first of all learning to observe yourself, you know, learning to really observe how you're reacting to things. And the next step is getting really honest about it, you know, because we don't like to see the things that are uncomfortable or unpleasant or that are not getting us to where we want to be. We want to gloss over those and hide them and push them away. So it's really getting willing to be uncomfortable, getting willing to tell the truth about yourself, and to set an intention, decide what you want in your life. You know, when I got to that point where I could see what I was doing wasn't going to deliver the sort of result that I was after, it's a question of, do you tolerate that or do you make changes? And, you know, for me, I was very fortunate early on in my chiropractic career. When I was still a student and still studying, I was working as a massage therapist for a really kind of old school chiro. And the way he worked, everybody got a 40-minute massage and then they got an adjustment from him. And at that stage, I was a young bloke. I don't know how old I was, early 20s. And I was fortunate that I had all these 40-minute windows to spend time with people who had a bit more time on the planet than I did. And I spoke to a lot of them, and so I thought, I'm going to learn from this. So I'd ask them questions, things, you know, what do you really regret in life? What are you really happy you did in your life? And almost universally the answers I got were, I wish I spent more time with my family. You know, I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I invested more in, I wish I worked less and invested more in the people I love. And that really had quite a profound effect on me. And, you know, when I got to that point in my career where I could see myself headed down that same road, I thought, Andrew, if you know this and you still end up in that place, you're an idiot. Sorry, I lost the hands free there. So, you know, it was time to make some change, really. And that's, I guess, what gave me the motivation to get uncomfortable and to really go on that mindset journey. And the truth is, mate, I'm still on it. We all are.
We sure are. Andrew, would it be fair to say that fear is one of the major things that would make our muscles go weak?
Absolutely. In fact, the way that we teach people to muscle test when we're learning the lifeline technique is have people say love, 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 and their muscle will test strong. And then we have them say fear, 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 and their muscle will immediately go weak. And you know what? I've never seen anybody that didn't apply to or that didn't work for. So fear is absolutely one of the major stresses that drives so much of what we do. You know, our subconscious mind, one of its primary jobs is to keep us safe. It's the one that's always scanning our environment, looking for the next threat or, you know, for anything that might be dangerous. And so fear in itself is not a bad thing. It's actually a tool to keep us safe. However, it's very easy for it to get out of control. You know, it's very easy for it to start to actually colour our perceptions, and that creates a whole lot of limitation, and it's one of the major drivers that keeps people stuck and small and frustrated and really not playing at their highest level in their life.
Great. If you don't mind, Andrew, I wouldn't mind reading from page 124 of your book, where it's talking about fear, and it says, one of the biggest is probably the fear of loss. Basically, anything that we value can become a source of fear of loss for us. In fact, studies show that most people are more motivated by fear of loss than they are by the promise of gain. This fear, in all of its many forms, comes down to having a scarcity mindset, the belief that the universe is not infinite and abundant. If you believe in an abundant universe, then there is no reason to fear loss of anything, as there is always more available. Anything lost is easily recovered. This is a far less stressful way to live. Can you add a little bit more to that type of fear, the fear of loss?
Sure. So, like it's saying there, really, that can drive so many things. I even saw a study just the other day where they took a couple of monkeys. They gave one monkey an apple, and that monkey was a happy monkey. And they gave another monkey 2 apples, and then they took one off him. And that monkey was not a happy monkey. He was a cranky monkey. Right? Same thing. Both monkeys had 1 apple, but 2 completely different outcomes. It's just the way we're wired. And, that applies really in all areas of our life. But it can drive so much stress. When we feel, like we said, when we fear something's limited, then it doesn't matter actually how much of it we have. And this is the key thing. You could be a billionaire and still not be free of that fear. Because the more you have, the more you fear losing it. Yet you could have almost nothing and have that abundant mindset, and that fear just doesn't have the same impact. So, we fear losing the people we love. We fear losing money. We fear losing respect. We fear losing, almost anything. In fact, it's true, anything that you value can become a source of fear. But only if we're looking at it through that scarcity mindset, through that filter that there's not enough, that if I lose this, I might not get it back again, that, really it's believing in limitation. You see, another good example, look at someone like Donald Trump. That guy doesn't have a scarcity mindset, and he's gone bankrupt a bunch of times, and within a year or two, he's back on the billionaire list because he's got his mindset. He's got some other issues, but he's got his mindset switched on in that regard. Whereas, I know some very wealthy and powerful individuals who haven't got that sorted. They live in fear. And let me tell you, it's not a good way to live. And ultimately, it poisons our relationships and it creates disease in our body.
I have to say, Andrew, that since I saw you in Sydney, I've read your book, and I'd have to put it up there as one of my favourites. And I'd just like to ask you a question, though, for the general public, maybe somebody who doesn't understand kinesiology. Do you have a way of making it easy to teach them so that they can actually come to full grasp of what you've got in your book?
Teaching them in terms of how kinesiology works, you mean?
Yeah, or how they can use it themselves?
Yeah, look, the truth is anyone can do kinesiology. It's not a secret magic or anything like that. It often looks that way when you first look at it, but the truth is anyone can do it. And it really starts out by just playing around with it. I learned first to muscle test other people professionally in my practice, but what really has driven my own growth on this journey was learning to muscle test myself, being able to get that immediate feedback about your own reactions to the world. And that can happen through any muscle in the body. The way that I started out learning, the one that I found easiest, was to make a ring with my fingers like this and try and break that ring, try and squeeze the fingers apart. So I'd start off by making a statement, and make a statement that you know is true. My name's Andrew, the sky's blue, it's daytime, whatever it is. That holds really nice and strong. And then I'd make the opposite statement, it's the sky's pink or something. And try that same thing, and what I find is that the muscle would just give way. And, at first there's a real tendency to sort of think, I'm having myself on, did I do that on purpose? Did I make that happen? And, anybody who's starting to play around with these concepts, let me completely encourage you that that's normal, and that's really, I went through that very much so. But over time, you develop more and more of a feel for it. You develop more and more confidence for it. And over time, I developed different ways to muscle test myself, because I found when I was doing a lot of this work, doing sessions with people, I started wearing out my thumb joints using that particular muscle test. So these days I like to sort of just have my arm bent to 90 degrees and I just test like this. Everything in my book can be done without the benefit of kinesiology, particularly if you learn to observe yourself. You know, you'll find there's lists of statements and affirmations and things in there, and you'll find that some of them you'll say them and you'll feel fine, you'll feel good, and others you'll say them and it's like, oh, it just doesn't quite feel right, or it feels stressful. Over the years, working with a lot of people over the phone and over Skype like this, I've also come to really recognise you can hear it in people's voice as well. When they make a statement that they're congruent with, it's rock solid. When they make a statement that there's an issue there, there's a wobble, they trip over the words, they sound a bit unsure, it's like there's a question mark at the end of the statement. So there are many ways to pick up that stress. And, you know, kinesiology is not something mystical, it's simply a feedback device. But it's a really, really useful one, you know, and I would suggest anyone who reads my book and follows the exercises in it will get massive benefit without using kinesiology. But if you add that in, that's kind of the special sauce that really takes it to the next level.
And what about your money mindset mastery program? Is that something that the general public can do, or is that for the medical practitioners?
Well, initially it was particularly for health practitioners, but over time what started happening was that people wanted to bring their husband or their cousin or someone along to the seminar, or, you know, to be involved in the program, which, to be honest, was a little bit scary for me at first, you know. Health practitioners have some familiarity with these kind of concepts. They're pretty open to this stuff. But when I started having, you know, I remember one of the first ones I had was a construction manager. And that, I thought, oh, this guy's going to think I'm a fruitcake, you know. Real estate developers, you know, various different people like that. And what's really been surprising to me over time is actually how open all of those people have been to it. It's like on some level, they just know it makes sense. You know, we have an inbuilt ability to pick up on truth, you know, if we're kind of connected to it. And that's when I really started to think, you know what, this stuff's universal. It's not about health practitioners, it's about human beings. And that's really my belief at the moment. So the issue, you know, the challenge as far as being involved in that program is simply my capacity and my time, but anyone's welcome.
Sure. So where do people find you, Andrew?
The best place to connect with me, if they like, is to have a look at my website, which is www.themoneyisinthe.mindset.com. To be honest with you, Graham, it's pretty old and daggy, that website these days. So please forgive me for that if you happen to go there. However, you know, if you pop your name and email in there, you'll get 3 videos, the 3 critical money mindset mistakes. But it will also subscribe you to my mailing list, and that's really where you'll hear about what I'm up to these days, and, you know, opportunities to come along to a live event, that kind of thing. I'm also really kind of moving into using webinars these days because, you know, technology's just made the world so much more accessible. You know, if you're not in Sydney, it's hard to get to a live workshop, but on the web, anyone can tune in and listen. So, you know, that's a real blessing, and that's something I'm kind of moving towards more and more.
Okay, so let's finish off, Andrew. Is there one last final bit of wisdom that you could give our viewers?
Oh, good questions, mate. There's many.
Just pluck one.
Yeah, you know what I'm come to believe a lot. You know, I wrote my book, The 7 Subconscious Keys, because they were 7 patterns I was seeing over and over and over again. You know, there's a lot of them, but these were the core ones. And the one that I see, particularly in Australia, in our psyche, that's such a huge one for people, if I had my time again, I'd almost put this as number 1 in the book, is that life doesn't have to be a struggle. And it's as hard as we make it. You know, I see people who have this incredible workload and who are out there doing all these things in the world, and relatively stress-free. And I see other people who, objectively looking, have so much less on their plate, and yet they're completely overwhelmed with stress. And when you step back and look at it, it doesn't make sense. And the reality is, it's not about objectively what's going on. It's about our perception. It's about how difficult we make it. And there's such a strong belief, particularly in Australia, that, you know, if you didn't work your ass off for it, if you didn't sacrifice, if you didn't struggle, if it wasn't hard, then you didn't really deserve it, you didn't really earn it. And, you know, I'll put my hand up and say I was a huge... I bought into this one in a big way as part of my upbringing. You know, I was taught to work hard and all of that, and there's nothing wrong with hard work, but the more that you actually let go of the need to struggle and just allow life to flow, the more it does. You know, life can be so much more fun and easy. And, you know, take that approach, observe yourself, be honest, be willing to get uncomfortable, and, mate, it's incredible what you can achieve.
Yeah. I'm with you. I was brought up in that mentality, that lack mentality, also in Australia. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's being associated with people like you that has helped me propel myself out of that. So I'd like to thank you, Andrew, for being a part of the show.
Thank you, mate. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed chatting.
So I'd like to ask our listeners to do me a favour and go on to the iTunes Be Empowered show and leave a review on iTunes itself. That would then boost the ratings of the show and help to get this message out there to a wider audience. Andrew's covered where you can find him. I've also have a website, www.beempoweredgroup.com, and there's a free download there, a book called Know Your True Value and Worth. And Andrew, I think you'd agree that we've really been talking about that for the last hour on this interview. So
Absolutely.
I just put it in my own words. So once again, thank you everybody, and on behalf of Dr. Andrew Powell and myself, we'd like to wish you every blessing going forward. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Be Empowered podcast. For more on regaining your power by bridging that gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are, go to www.beempoweredgroup.com and enter your name and email address to receive a free ebook and get notified of any upcoming podcasts. Remember, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world. Changing your energy transforms your life.